Mom. It's me. So we're on chapter 7, Ellie's decision. Okay, so we're going to see what happens with Ellie today. Yakov felt tears of joy burn his eyes as Ellie told him about Shaul. Remember, they found him. He came back. And Miriam scolds him, but I see her sneaking scraps of meat to him when she thinks no one's looking. Like grandfather, he said with a delighted laugh. Always he scolds, but then he pats him and he scratches his ears. A wave of homesickness flooded over the boy. All he wanted was to see grandfather and Shaul once again. Just to see. It won't be long, you know, and you'll all be able to be together again. The doctor ought to be here in a while, and you can get the straight story from him. He told Moshe and me that it's really looking good. A balding, white-coated English doctor with a thin mustache pulled the curtain back and said cheerily, "Looking quite good, actually." Jakob turned his head in the direction of the crisp British accent. "They found Shaul, doctor," he said excitedly. "He's at Miss Ellie's house." "No doubt eating you out of house and home," he said, switching the overhead light on and turning the dim bedside light on. "Today we change the bandages and give you a few minutes to look about while we check your progress." Remember, Mommy's whole face and eyes, everything was burned. Yakov grimaced at the sharp pain he felt as the doctor gently cut away the bandages covering his eyes. "Relax, my boy," said the doctor. "Things may be a little fuzzy at first." Ellie reached over and took his hand. "It's okay, Yakov. I'm here." He squeezed her hand tightly, fearful that when the bandages were finally taken away, he would only see darkness. It was, he thought, God's punishment for his sins. "I am afraid." "The room will be dark," intoned the gentle voice of the doctor. "A little later we will lighten your surroundings so you will have a chance to read just a bit at a time." "If I am blind, it is God's punishment," he said quietly. Ellie drew her breath in sharply. "Don't say that, Yakov." She gripped his hand tighter and kissed his fingers. "God didn't do this to you." She heard herself echoing Uncle Howard's words. "Men did it. And very evil men at that," added the doctor as he unwound the bandages. But I looked at a graven image. I have sinned against the law of Moses." Ellie exchanged concerned looks with the gray-haired physician. As he took away the last of the long bandages, leaving 2 cotton pads over the boy's eyes. "What do you mean?" Ellie asked, feeling the same sense of isolation she had felt when Moshe prayed with Yakov. "The picture, the young girl reading. I looked upon it and have broken the law. I thought that these days it must be my punishment to be blind." The doctor paused and stroked Yakov's pale cheek. "I would think that if I were God, Yakov, I would do everything possible to give you sight. I am only a doctor with a heart made of a man, and I have not done anything that I would have done anything that I could to help you." Yakov nodded slowly. "It is now certainly in the hands of God," said the doctor, "but do not judge his heart until I lift the bandages." He smiled and he winked at Ellie, and she felt grateful for his sensitivity and understanding. She patted Yakov's hand and remembered the story of Jesus healing the blind man. For the first time since she had been a child, she prayed that the tender heart of God had worked through the hands of the doctor. Gentle hands lifted a corner of the gauze pad. "Do not open your eyes until I say you may." He switched off the bedside light, leaving the room in a soft glow as he removed the final layers, dropping them into a metal bin. As he washed away a layer of crust covering the eye lid, Ellie stroked Yaakov's arm and silently prayed. All right then, young man, open your eyes. But I have sinned in other ways as well, he said, beginning to panic. Open them slowly. It may be a little painful. As if they were too heavy to lift, his eyelids fluttered and then opened just a crack. The doctor held a tiny pencil of light above his eyes and moved it slowly to the right and left. What do you see, Yakov? He asked. Tell me what you see. A little light, a small candle moving in the darkness very far away. Ellie sighed with relief. Excellent, said the doctor. Perhaps God has a tender heart, even when we sometimes have sinned. He said, medicating Yakov's eyes and then covering them with fresh bandages. Grandfather says he is slow to anger and ever merciful. Yakov smiled. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He is a rabbi at the Polish yeshiva in the old city. The doctor glanced quickly at Ellie. And has he been to visit you, Yakov? They say that the old city is cut off. I should like very much to talk with him about all that I am learning. Soon, perhaps you have family in the new city with whom you could stay if you were allowed to leave. No one, he answered sadly, except Shaw. Ah, yes, the doctor nodded. The dog. Ellie caught the doctor's eye. We could make arrangements, doctor. Don't make him stay here longer than is necessary. I would say by Christmas. Anyway, he squeezed Yakov's shoulder. Hanukkah, for sure. Eh? I should like very much to spend Hanukkah with Shaw and grandfather. Yakov turned his freshly band-aid head toward Ellie. Hanukkah is called the Festival of Lights, you know. It shall be good if I can see the lights. Will it not? Okay. New subject. The broad headlights of the ancient Harley Davidson cracked the cold darkness before Moshe, illuminating the road back to Jerusalem and Ellie. The motorcycle would have to do. He could not wait for the Jewish agency's sputtering Piper Cub to lift him over the danger that lurked in the roadside, not since he had heard about Gerhard and Hassan. His uneasiness about Gerhard's photograph had transformed into a brutal awareness that he knew the terrorist's face not because he had seen him, but from Ellie's detailed description of the man who had broken her camera and knocked her down on the sidewalk. Gerhard was not, he realized, on his way to Palestine, but he was already in the service of the Motif and was walking freely about the streets of Jerusalem. 3 times he tried to reach Jerusalem by phone, only to learn that the phone lines were down. He had sent Ehud and the Ava Maria out alone for the pickup, borrowed Dov's motorcycle for the midnight trip back to Jerusalem. He did not guess in how much danger Ellie was at this point. He could only guess that Gerhard and Hassan had followed her because of his relationship with her. Undoubtedly, they sought to locate Haganah bases throughout the city and had marked them as targets. At any rate, no Jew was safe in the holy city now, not with the likes of Gerhard working where least expected, mutilate and murder the innocent until the end. The terror defeats the morale and determination to stand and fight. Jerusalem, Moshe feared, was on the brink of another kind of Holocaust. The biting wind tore at Moshe's face and fingers as the heavy motorcycle roared past the ghostly white stone of the ancient village of Beit Dagon, named after the ancient fishing god of the Philistines. 6 miles further along, the icy rain fell, soaking through his jacket and trousers as he passed Sarafand, Palestine's largest British military base. Just beyond Sarafand, a tall minaret marked his progress into the hostile Arab territory. I think it's like a tower that you can, you look out of like a guard tower, but not exactly. Maybe you know what it is, Mom. Okay. Um, he was in Arab territory. All the kingdoms and governments have sought to possess this land, he thought. Where are they now? As the cold numbed his cheeks, he remembered a saying he had learned from the old rabbi when he was a child, skipping through the streets of the old city. As dust outlasts iron, Moshe, so Israel will outlast her oppressors. Someday our Messiah will come, and once again we shall have a nation. Then we shall be truly free. Moshe could not remember when he had stopped looking for the Messiah. Perhaps it had been the day the British officer had come with the news that his older brother Eli had been killed by men under the command of Ibrahim el-Hassan. There must be another way for Jews to live in freedom, he had told his grief-stricken mother. If God will not send the one to bear our burdens, then maybe I must learn to bear them. We must learn to bear them ourselves and make a homeland that is a refuge for every child of Abraham. Thus, the establishment of the nation of Israel had become his dream, his Messiah. It was a dream he knew that would be purchased with blood of many. As he neared the turn, he passed the burned-out hulk of yesterday's bus from Tel Aviv, the coffin for 32 precious lives. Was that only yesterday, he wondered? Already their blood was washed from the road by the rain. Only 32 more Jews, the world would say. What was 32 compared to millions? A sense of despair filled him as he realized that each life would soon be washed away from the world's memory. They don't know, he said to the ghost as he passed, that each of you had a name. Ahead lay Bab el-Wad, the twisting, contorted agony of the mountain gorge that led to Jerusalem. Moshe gripped the handlebars of the cycle as it reared back as he began the ascent. By now he was completely soaked to the skin, but still he thanked God for the rain that slashed against him. The cold, brutal night had driven the Arab peasants who guarded the pass into warmth of their villages. The smell of soak-rain pines filled his nostrils, and he found it hard to believe that danger lurked so near him. 5 miles outside of Jerusalem, the friendly lights of kibbutz glistened from the hillside to his left. Just beyond on the right stood the medieval remains of a crusader castle, and ahead the lights of Jerusalem sparkled a welcome. It was hours past curfew when Moshe at last passed the dark, squat building of Egged bus station, and then the brightly lit building that housed the Palestine Post, where printers were setting tomorrow's news. For once the headlines would be tame when the morning paper hit the streets. But, Moshe thought, that couldn't last long. He turned on Ben Yehuda Street and roared past the Atlantic Hotel, where David Meyer had shared a room with Michael Cohen, and where a half a dozen other members of the Haganah lived. Moshe wiped the rain from his goggles and looked up at the 3rd floor where the lights of several rooms still burned. When at last he turned into King George Avenue and past the Jewish Agency building, he could see that the old man was still up in his lit office. He was tempted to stop and share his information with him, but there would be enough time for that in the morning. Right now, all he wanted was to see Ellie's smiling face, to hear her say she understood why he had not been able to tell her about his secret life. He turned on to Rehiva and idled up the street, his eyes searching the shadows for someone who might be watching the Monier home. The street seemed to be empty and silent. Every window was dark. Moshe turned off the engine and coasted on the heavy machine, balancing with his leg as the cycle rolled to a stop in front of the Monier home. Moshe lifted his goggles and hung them from dripping handlebars. Then he stiffly dismounted and set the kickstand. He stood for a long moment staring up at the sleeping house, and then he slowly walked toward the front door. I I love you.